I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. The rain had soaked through the bottom of my coat by the time I reached the edge of the walkway. My suitcase, a faded burgundy thing I'd bought years ago at Macy's, caught on the last step. I tugged it free without looking back. They didn't close the door. That stung more than if they had. They left it cracked open like a silent dare. Like they were sure I wouldn't have the dignity to walk away without a scene. But I gave them nothing. The Uber driver didn't say a word. Just looked at me through the mirror, once then drove. I was grateful. I didn't want pity. I wanted a room with a door that locked from the inside and silence that didn't feel like punishment. The motel smelled like cigarette ash and lemon cleanser, but the bed was clean. I unpacked my medication first. Blood pressure, arthritis, and the pink one that made me sleep. I lined them up on the nightstand beside the remote and the phone I no longer felt like using. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the brass key from the lining of my purse. It was warm from being close to me all day. Daniel had given it to me in the hospital 3 days before he passed. "Keep it safe," he'd whispered. He didn't say what it was for, but I had a feeling. A quiet, steady one that had lived in my chest ever since. For months, I didn't touch it. I was still trying to be part of Ellis's life, still trying to believe that family meant something. Now I was alone in a room that cost $58 a night, listening to the hum of the old AC unit. And for the first time, I let myself wonder, really wonder what that key opened. In the morning, I'd find out. I had folded the sheets the night before, soft cotton, with a lilac trim I knew Celine liked. The shortbread tin was still warm when I stepped off the bus. I'd even worn the earrings she'd given me 2 Christmases ago, hoping she might notice. Celine opened the door halfway, her smile quick and distant. "Oh, I thought we told you Ellis's work friend is staying in the guest room." She moved aside like she was doing me a favor. I stepped in, holding the tin close to my chest. Ellis waved from the kitchen without turning around. "Hey, Mom." That was it. No hug. No how was the trip. Just the sound of the blender and his voice blending into it. Dinner was leftovers from their fridge. I offered to set the table. Celine said they'd already eaten. I sat at the counter and ate alone. That night, I curled up on the couch beneath a throw blanket that didn't quite reach my feet. The room was too bright, the television playing some late-night comedy Ellis had left running. I didn't want to turn it off. I was afraid it would draw attention. My knees ached from the drive, but I didn't ask for anything. In the morning, I made coffee quietly and stayed out of the way. I offered to pick up groceries, run errands, fold laundry. Celine told me they had it handled. No one asked how I was sleeping, or how long I planned to stay. But I could feel the ticking clock behind every smile. On the second night, I tried not to shift too much on the couch, worried the springs would creak. On the third, the thermostat was turned down low. I didn't mention it. By the 4th morning, I understood what wasn't being said. I packed the tin untouched back into my bag and took my pills with cold coffee. Ellis glanced up from his laptop, and I almost said something. But I didn't. Instead, I zipped my bag and slipped the brass key into my coat pocket. I still had one place left to go. The motel curtains didn't close all the way. I lay awake, staring at the line of orange streetlights slicing across the ceiling. The hum of the air unit buzzed against the silence, filling the space with just enough sound to keep me from falling apart. I didn't cry. Not out of pride, just habit. There comes a point when the tears dry before they can even reach the surface. I had passed that point months ago, maybe longer. I set out my pills in a neat row on the nightstand, uncapped the water bottle, and swallowed them one by one. Then I sat for a long time with the brass key in my hand. Daniel had pressed it into my palm after they'd moved him to hospice care. His voice had been barely above a breath. "You'll know when." I didn't ask what he meant. I just nodded and tucked it into the seam of my purse like something sacred. I waited because I believed Ellis might come around. That grief had made him distant, not cruel. That Celine's sharpness came from stress, not disdain. But when I stood in the rain and neither of them looked back, I knew. They expected me to disappear quietly. They'd planned around it, counted on my silence like it was part of the furniture. But silence isn't surrender. It's a choice. And I was done letting them choose for me. I reached into my coat, felt the worn paper tucked in the inside pocket, the last bank statement Daniel had mailed to our house instead of Ellis's. I remembered how he'd started keeping files in the garage behind the old paint cans. Celine once called it clutter. Daniel had said, it's insurance. I hadn't understood then. I did now. The next morning, I put on fresh clothes, checked out before sunrise, and took a cab to the downtown branch of Franklin Bank. I carried nothing but my bag and the key. The woman at the counter looked up when I approached, and I spoke for the first time that day. I'd like to access a safe deposit box. The metal clink echoed as the box slid forward across the counter. The bank clerk stepped aside politely, letting me take my time in the small, windowless room. The door shut behind her with a soft thud, and I stood still for a moment, breathing in the weight of it all. The key turned smoother than I expected. Inside the box was deeper than I remembered. I lifted the lid, and there it was, Daniel's handwriting on the envelope resting at the top. Beneath it, a thick binder with tabs labeled Trust Property Shares and Instructions. And at the bottom, an envelope bearing the neat signature of our attorney, Mr. Pierce. I sat down and opened Daniel's letter first. Only 5 lines. No apologies, no justifications, just clarity. If you're reading this, you already know. I left it all to you, not to punish Ellis, but to protect you. Do what you must, Corliss. You don't owe them anything. My hands trembled, but I didn't cry. I had already run out of tears in their hallway. I opened the binder. The first page confirmed it. The trust held assets totaling just over $30 million. Real estate in Connecticut and Manhattan. Long-term investments. 2 liquid accounts. 1 penthouse fully paid. Everything listed in my name. All transferred and finalized before Daniel passed. I thought of the way Ellis shrugged when I offered to help with groceries. Of how Celine once joked about poor people's soup when I reheated lentils. The couch, the thermostat, the locked guest room. They had no idea what they were shoving out the door. They thought I was small, dependent out of moves. But Daniel had made sure I wasn't. I closed the binder, smoothed my hands over the cover, and tucked it gently into my bag. I left the letter where it was unreadable now, through the blur of my resolve. When I stepped back into the lobby, the clerk smiled politely and thanked me. I nodded. Outside, the morning had brightened. I took out my phone and dialed the number printed on the envelope from Mr. Pierce. I still remembered the day Ellis called me from the porch of that house, voice shaking with excitement. Mom, we found it. It's perfect, but we need a co-signer. I didn't hesitate. I'd just retired, and the pension had come through. Send me the paperwork, I told him. He didn't ask twice. The down payment came from my savings. I dipped into the small account Daniel and I had set aside for travel. We'll go next spring, I'd told him, after Ellis and Celine settle in. But Daniel never made it to spring, and the travel fund was gone by the time they'd installed granite countertops. My name was never on the deed. Celine said it might complicate things if something happened, and I didn't push. I wanted them to feel secure to start their life with confidence. I gave them the house without ever asking for a corner of it. Now Celine posted home tour videos online, polished floors, new paint, a chandelier in the dining room. She walked through the backyard saying things like, "This space is really ours now." I watched one clip on mute while sitting in the lawyer's waiting room. She was bragging about the new wine cellar, tracing her fingers along the walnut rack As she said, built completely custom. Took forever to get the design right. They'd used the money I'd given them, the very check I handed over, without reading the memo line. For emergencies, I'd said. I suppose they considered poor wine storage a crisis. Ellis never mentioned the remodels during our calls. He always sounded tired, distracted. I assumed they were scraping by. But I suppose people hide comfort the same way they hide cruelty, quietly and with a smile. When Mr. Pierce came out to greet me, I closed the video and slipped the phone into my bag. His office was just as I remembered it. Dark wood, high shelves. Daniel's name in a file on the corner of the desk. He poured us each a cup of coffee and opened a folder. "I take it you're ready," he said. I nodded. More than ready. Mr. Pierce didn't look surprised to see me. He just gave a small nod and gestured toward the seat across from his desk. "I figured I'd hear from you eventually," he said, sliding the folder forward with care. "Your husband made it very clear that this was for you and you alone." I didn't reach for the folder right away. My fingers stayed folded in my lap. It felt like if I touched it, I'd break something invisible between past and present. He opened the cover gently, like he knew I wasn't ready to. "This account was established 2 years before his passing," he continued. "Your name only. Emergency access, no shared beneficiaries. It's liquid accessible whenever you need it." I looked down. The number at the bottom of the page had too many zeros to feel real. There was also an address. Upper East Side, New York. "He wanted you to be able to leave quietly if you ever needed to," Mr. Pierce said. I didn't speak. I didn't cry either. I think I'd run out of reactions. The second envelope was thinner. 1 page notarized. A single sentence in Daniel's handwriting had been scanned across the top. "If Corliss ever needs a new beginning, let this be her foundation." There was no drama in the room. No trembling, no shock. Just steady truth being laid out after too much time spent in lies. He waited for me to respond, but I only nodded. "There's no rush," he said. "No pressure to use it all or any of it. But the moment you're ready, everything is in place." I finally met his eyes. "I think I've been ready for longer than I realized." He didn't smile. He just closed the folder and stood. "Then we'll proceed on your word." I left the office with the key still in my coat and the papers untouched in my bag. I didn't need signatures to feel the shift. I already knew what came next. It was time to reclaim what they thought I'd given up. Mr. Pierce handled the details. I didn't need to ask twice. We named the shell company after a flower Daniel once brought home after a trip. Trillium Group LLC. Simple, forgettable, silent. Celine and Ellis had refinanced the house a few months prior. Something about locking in a lower rate. It opened just enough of a window. The loan shifted hands twice in the span of a week, once to a private lender and then to Trillium. They never noticed. They had no reason to. The funds had come from the emergency account. I used less than 5% of it. I signed the paperwork from the guest room of the penthouse, sitting at a table Daniel had picked out before he died. The air smelled like lemon soap and quiet. By the second Monday, Mr. Pierce called to confirm title finalized. Ownership transferred. Everything clean. I didn't feel glee, no triumph. Just a soft relief like unclenching a fist you didn't realize you'd held for years. On Tuesday morning, I instructed the courier service to deliver a sealed envelope to the house. 1 copy to Ellis. 1 to Celine. I pictured them opening it. I imagined the silence that would fall once they read the name of the new legal owner. No threats, no drama, just fact. They wouldn't be able to reach me, not through numbers they'd already deleted, not through emails they never responded to. The letter gave them 30 days to vacate or negotiate rent under the new owner. I didn't want the house back. I didn't want to live among their memories. but I did want them to feel what it meant to be powerless in a space they thought they controlled. I wanted them to understand the cost of pushing someone out without checking how far the fall would be. That evening, I watched the streetlights flicker on from the penthouse window. The phone buzzed once a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Celine's voice came through the speaker, high and sharp. "You're making us homeless," she snapped. "How could you do this to your own son?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The woman who told me to cry and crawl into the street didn't get to rewrite the story now. An hour later, Ellis left a voicemail. I recognized the stammer. He only did that when he was cornered. "Mom, Look, I didn't know the refinancing we didn't mean anything by Celine thought you were staying one night. We weren't trying to hurt you." He paused, breathed hard into the phone, then added, "Can we just talk? Maybe come by." Explain I played the message twice, not because I needed to hear it, but because I wanted to be sure I didn't feel anything when I did. I didn't. By Thursday, the movers had arrived. I drove by just after 8. My hands didn't shake. My foot didn't slow. I didn't park. I didn't roll the window down. I simply drove past. Celine was on the porch, arguing with a man in uniform. Ellis stood near the mailbox, holding something, maybe the letter I'd sent. His face was pale. His shirt was wrinkled. He looked smaller than I remembered. They both turned at the same time. And they saw me. I kept going. I could have stopped. I could have offered explanations or smug silence or even closure, but they didn't deserve closure. They deserved to feel what I felt when they turned their backs and left me on the curb without looking. I crossed the intersection and merged into traffic, the house shrinking behind me in the rearview mirror. There was nothing left for me in that driveway, not even anger. Later that evening, I poured a cup of tea and sat near the window of the penthouse. The city was quiet at that hour. I picked up the binder Daniel left me and flipped to the last tab. It was time to make the final call. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped directly into the living room. No hallway, no shared floor, just space. Mine. I didn't rush to explore. I walked slowly, tracing my fingers along the edge of the marble countertop. Cool, smooth. Not a single crack or fingerprint. The floors gleamed polished oak, catching the light in quiet waves. Daniel had chosen the finish he'd wanted it to feel warm, not grand. This wasn't a prize. It wasn't a throne. It was a place to rest, to stop holding my breath. I opened one cabinet and found a teapot still in its packaging. The label had Daniel's name on the receipt. I left it where it was. In the corner of the main room, there was a small stone mantel. I reached into my bag and pulled out the photo I'd carried with me since the funeral. Daniel, standing at the harbor in Maine, squinting into the sun. I placed it on the mantel and stepped back. For the first time in a long time, I felt still. There was no noise to fill, no apology to wait for, no empty seat at someone else's table. I didn't need Ellis to say he was sorry. I didn't need Celine to explain what she meant. I didn't want them to understand. I wanted peace, and that was mine now. The furniture was modest. A soft chair by the window. A table set for two, but only one place was laid. I left it that way. I made tea in silence. No television, no music, just the hum of the city 5 floors below and the steam curling from the kettle. There were no calls that night, no knocks, no drama, just me, and Daniel's picture, and a life I could begin without permission. The next morning, I took out a notebook and circled a date. The scholarship fund Daniel had once mentioned in passing. It was time to make it real. I parked across the street, engine still running. The house looked different now, new shutters, a brighter trim, but the lilac bush in the yard was still mine. I'd planted it the spring after Ellis was born, back when I believed a garden could root a family. The new owners were out back laughing with someone I didn't know. I slipped through the gate, quietly walked to the shed, and opened it with the old key. They hadn't changed the lock. My gloves were still on the hook. The trowel with the worn handle, the shears Daniel had sharpened every fall, still there. Dusty, but untouched. I gathered them carefully, not because I needed them, but because they were the last things I'd touched in that soil. The last things before they decided I no longer belonged. I didn't linger. I didn't look back. Driving home, I passed the school where I'd spent 34 years. The playground had a new fence. The windows were brighter. Someone had painted sunflowers near the front office. I slowed down and let the memories surface, but they didn't sting. I remembered morning bells and hallway laughter. The quiet kindness of children who hadn't yet learned how to turn cold. The wind shifted, cooler now but gentle. I rolled down the window and let it pass over me. At the next light, I opened my planner and found the page I'd marked. The meeting was confirmed. The fund was in motion. A scholarship for students who had no one left to believe in them except maybe someone like Daniel, still working quietly in the background. I circled the date with a pen. Not too hard, just once. Then I turned onto East 75th and headed home.